I'm just gonna go and shoot me up some heroin and have sex with a prostitute behind the Dairy Mart or something. Like, no.
I don't know about that. Not gonna lie, wouldn't do it, but it doesn't sound like not fun. I know you released a few Twitter videos, and you weren't thrilled with the Hopper AIDS. The AIDS, I think the title was the AIDS Epidemic.
Yeah, because no one's actually thrilled with AIDS itself.
Yeah. Right, no one's thrilled with AIDS itself. Shh, Jared, it's not. Shh, no more talking. You're not a moderator. You couldn't be a moderator if you wanted to.
I don't want that.
And if Jeff ever tells you to stop speaking, you have to stop speaking.
I can do that.
So just don't speak.
I'm happy to.
I'm way too polite for that. Way too polite. We're not on Twitter. Like when I'm on Twitter, gloves are off. It's just. Yeah,
I get it. And it's like you want the little blue check mark scalp. I understand. There's some of that going on. So
it's not the first time I've gone for it either, to be honest.
No.
with you.
Okay. So what was it that I know you made a few claims. I kind of have some in memory, but I want you to represent your own views and what your issues were with the video that I released, so I'm not misrepresenting you.
Okay, so I would say that the videos that I made on Twitter were just mostly satirical and like hyperbole for the most part. But I went ahead and I made kind of a long form YouTube video about it, addressing some of the concerns that I had. And I kind of broke it down into, there were three main grievances that I had with it.
Okay.
One was on the term being used, whether it was an epidemic or not. There was the statistics, and then there was the research money issue that I had.
Okay.
And like a few of it, okay, so the question of whether something is or isn't an epidemic, I mean, by and large, we don't usually call something an epidemic outside of, media and hysteria unless the CDC classifies it as. And at a particular point in time, they did actually classify AIDS as an epidemic. And the numbers do kind of show that it does seem to fall in line with what they would usually call an epidemic.
Okay. Did you want to go? Can I respond?
Oh, please,
Sure.
by all means.
Okay.
We can just do this casually. It's fine.
Yeah, no, I just don't want to interrupt you, especially when you're doing it by Skype. I
Sure.
want to be really clear before we go on down the trail about what the video was about, and it was that the AIDS epidemic and the reporting and the cultural hysteria was a hoax. The exaggeration, as reported in the media, what was absolutely that, an exaggeration, a hoax. For example, someone like Oprah saying 1 in 5 heterosexuals will be dead from AIDS by 1990. And I stand by that, by those numbers, particularly for straight, for heterosexual, monogamous couples, and that's not even reflected in the CDC, so we can get to those numbers. It was statistically a non-risk factor, and we were made to believe that wasn't the case. We were made to believe that everyone was at risk when that was never the case in the United States. So that's the thesis, and I would stand by that. I haven't seen anything that would make me question that.
Oh, no. I would absolutely agree with you. The hysteria. I mean, I'm 35, and I remember very distinctly the media hysteria going around AIDS.
Right.
But it was pretty bad at the time, up until we actually developed the right kind of medications to keep it in check. Like it was getting pretty scary. I mean, to a certain degree.
What numbers would reflect that, though? I mean, for someone, a non-intravenous drug-using heterosexual male in the United States, it was never getting really scary. It was never a risk factor. It was never a big killer.
True. But, okay, think about it like this. We have, according to the closest one I could find was 2014, that there's an estimated 1.1 million people in the United States that have HIV. So, of that, what is it? Here we go. I have it right somewhere. Did I just lose it? I feel so dumb.
That's okay. I'll go, so I'll actually give you some time to grab that. Yeah, I will say, and it's the same number that I talked about. It's still, statistically, it's a 0% risk for a heterosexual non-drug user, even if you're not monogamous, to get AIDS in the United States of America. So I would just say, and it's not a top 15, not a top 20 killer.
No, especially not anymore. Not at all.
At no
point.
At all. I would say.
But the thing is 0.07% is not the same as 0%. And that is an important thing. And there's also a problem with the statistics of how likely you are to catch AIDS. But okay, so we have 1.1 million people in the United States with HIV. Of those, it's 24% of those people got it through heterosexual contact.
Yeah. So again, let's go to using your more generous number, 0.7. I've seen as low as 0.4. Right. I think actually maybe even 0.3. So there's a slight variance there. I wouldn't call it a short-term stock market chart. It's pretty stable. So again,
I think it's actually 0.03.
Yeah, it might be that low. Sorry, I was trying to give you the 0.7, but
no, it's fine.
So I always try and give the I guess voice of opposition more leeway there. But again, closer to zero. Generally speaking, if you look closer to 0% than 1%. So again, with the premise of the video being the epidemic that we were made to believe, that's not the case, and we're going from 1 in 5 heterosexuals dead by 1990 to 0.03%, to use your own words. Even at its peak, it wasn't close to 1%. So again, I don't understand, especially when you had so much money, more funding for this disease than any other in the history of the United States, when it was a statistical non-risk factor. If you eliminate, you can count on one hand the amount of behaviors. Isn't it disingenuous to act as though it's an epidemic and that it was this massive silent killer when it's never been?
Well, okay, so there's a really important part in there.
Okay.
Now, we have to make the distinction of, are we talking about right now, or are we talking about in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s?
At
because
any point.
Those are two. Okay. So I'd say now, you could still technically, by how many numbers there are, you could still classify that there's an AIDS epidemic just by how many people are infected. But I myself would not necessarily call it that. The mortality rate for HIV infections is extremely low. But prior to the development of antiretroviral drugs, then getting AIDS was a death sentence. It was a death sentence. And the other thing, the reason we don't know what the risk factors were for a heterosexual male at that time, because the statistics that we're looking at, the 0.03%, that is, it's conditional. First of all, it has to be a single instance of sex with a woman who is infected with HIV. She has to be taking her current antiretroviral drugs, and she has to be asymptomatic at the time. And
no,
it's in the chart.
To what are you referring here? Are you referring to the chance of a male contracting HIV from a woman?
Yes.
Okay. So you're saying there's a specific study where all of these parameters were set.
That's the CDC study. There's a specific chart, and it's where these statistics came from. It's the one that's on your website too. And the risk factor does go up incrementally if she's not on antiretroviral drugs, and various different other.
I'm sure it would. I wouldn't deny that. But again, the risk
it would still be extremely low.
Yes, it would still be extremely low. And for people listening, I don't want to. I don't have the stat in front of me. Will we both agree single-digit percentile?
I think it's probably about that too.
Yeah, really low. So again, the point of the video, and I think this is kind of important because sometimes people take things out of context, and I don't mean taking the numbers out of context. I know some people complain that I didn't give citations. I give a litany of citations, but the context is everyone knows about AIDS. Everyone knows it. Everyone's seen it through the lens of an epidemic. Everyone's seen it as, oh, well, it's not a gay people's disease and it's discriminatory to say that. So I was going counter narrative by saying, no, that's not the case, and backing it up with research. So the context there is to set the record straight because of all the hysteria. And so I think even if we're agreeing on all this, I don't understand what about the video would be upsetting in that instance because, again, that's the whole premise of it.
So the thing that upset me the most about it, so as we're talking about this too, there's also the other condition of when we're talking about heterosexual contact, that's only for males. Women are twice more likely and more at risk to catch HIV from a single exposure to a man infected with HIV.
Right. For the same reason that a homosexual man is exponentially more likely to contract it than a woman if he's receiving anal sex. Yeah.
So that number goes up, but there's also, I mean, if we're talking about statistics, when it comes down to it too, a homosexual contact, man on man homosexual contact, if he's pitching, we'll put it that way, if he's pitching,
sure,
and his partner has HIV, is asymptomatic and is taking HRVs, his chance for contracting it is 0.09%.
Sure.
That's only 3 times higher than a heterosexual man. As well, if you're receiving, you're at a much higher, you're catching, whatever.
Yeah.
It's 1.1%, even with HRVs, even with that whole thing. So it's still really low. But the main part of that is why it's so low now is because of those HRVs. They're incredible.
It's always been very, very, would be a good example. It's always been very, very low, statistically 0 for a heterosexual male who is not using intravenous drugs to get AIDS in the United States. Basically, your chances of getting it are 0. Statistically, you can say there was a variance in the 80s or 90s where it was way higher for gay people, but comparably it's still exponentially higher for homosexuals in the United States. So it doesn't really change the context or the premise. I mean, I believe in one of your videos you said, how does a virus know who you're having sex with, asking where he made this comparison. And a lot of people said, that I don't care about gays or whatever. But the truth is, we'll have Chad with AIDS on afterward, who is gay and who does have HIV. No, this is actually designed to try and inform and help people. How does a virus know who you're having sex with? Well, there's a sliding scale, and we know of risky sexual behavior. So from my left, your right, it would be oral sex, and then going to penile vaginal sex, and then going to anal sex. And then surprisingly, there are new studies where actually men are far more likely to contract AIDS if they're engaging in anal sex than even heterosexual couples. There was just a study on that in NPR.
Interesting.
So, that's how the virus knows. No one's saying it's, it's like from Alien, it's a Ridley Scott film, but the statistics do bear it out. So I guess, now we're at this point where we agree on a whole lot. So I guess I'm not seeing where we disagree. We both agree, okay, it was a statistical non-risk factor for heterosexuals. The CDC reflects that. The stats reflect that. That's never really changed, and there was mass hysteria. So where do we disagree?
Well, there's one other tiny little part about it too, and this brings it about. There's two main focuses on what I think we hugely disagree on. The one last thing about the stats too, people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender only account for 3.8% people in the country. When you're looking at the statistics from the CDC and the risk factor, that's taking into the account like the type of sexual behavior you're getting into. The potentiality of the HRVs not working, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
Now, if over 96% of the country is straight, even if the numbers of HIV people is like I think it's a quarter. It's something like a quarter are from heterosexual contact. I mean, that's still that does mean that the risk is still there, and it's still good to be informed. Wear a rubber, that sort of thing.
Sure.
I suppose one of my grievances, and it wasn't the big one, it was probably the most minor one, is it felt that it was brushing off AIDS as not necessarily something you still have to be concerned about. It's definitely not like the panic. This isn't Oprah or Madonna coming up there and trying to tell you you're gonna get AIDS. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That was
uncanny Madonna impression, by the way.
I practice every day, and so the.
By the way, I know her parents. They run a winery, and I won't say I have a relative who's near them, and they are the nicest people. Trump supporters, not very happy with their daughters. Also, very confused by her English accent, considering she's from I think Rockford. Anyway, sorry, continue. So your grievance was brushing off AIDS before I distracted you, but continue with that, and then I'll respond.
No, that's a trip. That's a trip. Yeah, no, that's pretty much like that was probably my minor grievance, and then the big grievance is after that. So
okay.
If you wanted to.
So we would agree then, because I know you said that I didn't provide citations. So we would both agree that's not the case then.
Yeah, you got the citations up. I looked at them, and they were good citations.
I think a lot of people, and this is a very common, not that you're the left at all, but very common from the left, people who criticize, they just go, you didn't give citations, meaning I didn't copy-paste the exact URL, all 40 in the description. What we do is we put up the screen grab and the URL right there. So if they can't be bothered to go through the anguish of the browser. So, okay, yeah, we did provide citations, and I want to make sure people understand, because some people are saying, well, there's such a variance in the statistics and CDC depending to year. It's actually not. The variance, as far as the statistical likelihood of contracting AIDS, changes almost zero, but the number of transmissions each year from 6,000 to 8,000, that changes. So it's irrelevant to the point. As far as brushing off AIDS, listen, a big portion of what I do is comedy. I mean, I had my dog playing, Tom Hanks in Philadelphia. So let's keep that in context here too. But
it was hilarious too.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I've ever wanted. But something that's important for people to note. People have said that. You're saying that what you're saying is going to be responsible for more people getting AIDS. What's ironic there is I've caught more flack for advocating behavior that would completely eliminate the possibility of contracting AIDS, probably more than any comedian I know. I've gotten so much crap for saying, hey, listen, I was abstinent until I was married. These are the benefits as I recommend it. That's hateful, that's sexist, of course, that's patriarchal, but makes it surefire that you don't get AIDS. While I'm a libertarian, and I have been very much a libertarian in my view on drugs and states' rights, I've also deeply discouraged personal use of drugs. So anyone who knows me and looks at my track record, I have consistently I guess, sort of tried to encourage behavior that would eliminate all possibility of contracting AIDS. And I don't think a couple of jokes with my dog in a video changes that.
I don't think necessarily. It's definitely not the end of the world, just because there was like a tone in a video that I didn't like, or I don't necessarily go. Because I mean, the thing is, it comes down to like one of those things about responsibility. And you're an entertainer and you're very good at your job. I make YouTube videos. We always have this notion of like personal responsibility that's kind of levied onto us, and I get criticisms all the time. You don't know what people are going to do after they hear your words, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes. I mean, I understand that. I understand that very, very well.
Sure.
I mean, maybe it's just a difference in personal opinion and take on it. I don't know. It's interesting.
I would counter with this. I actually, and I say this respectfully, I actually think that your point of view would result, certainly if people were to follow like your Twitter template or look at the videos that you released in response to this, would actually be more encouraging of behavior that could result in AIDS. I mean, my video is pretty clear, like be monogamous, be abstinent and then be monogamous for the rest of your life. Don't do intravenous drugs. I'm pretty clear. Where the thing you've been sort of ambivalent about drug use, like, I don't care what you do personally. I don't necessarily know that you've advocated abstinence. I'm not saying that you have to, but I'm saying if we remove the tone of it, I would say that actually in that video, I'm probably doing a lot more for people to avoid AIDS than my critics.
That's an interesting argument. That's a very interesting argument. I don't think I could agree with that necessarily.
Okay, what do you disagree with on that?
Because I think that's kind of prescribing a possibility of effect more so than what either our videos are actually going to reach. I mean, is there legitimately going to be somebody who takes a look at like one of my stupid crap posting Twitter videos, whatnot, and he's like, well, I'm just going to go and shoot me up some heroin and have sex with a prostitute behind the Dairy Mart or something. Like, no.
I don't know about that. I'm not going to lie. Wouldn't do it. But it doesn't sound like not fun. So I'm just saying it's a lot easier to engage in behavior that could lead to AIDS. It certainly would appeal to our carnal instincts more than the kind of lifestyle I would advocate. And so I just do find it ironic that I've been the target of like, well, you're being insensitive, and this could you're saying people shouldn't worry about AIDS. No, what I'm saying is be monogamous. Don't have sex with a bunch of random strangers. Particularly don't have butt sex with another gay guy in a truck stall, unprotected. Don't shoot intravenous drug use. And AIDS is a non-risk factor. The critics are saying AIDS and by the way, there's a huge problem that, and I know people have brought up, what about AIDS in Africa? Well, I've talked about this at great length. I think that's horrible. And I have I've gone to great lengths to separate the two. And I actually think it does a gross disservice to children in Africa who are born with AIDS for all of these Americans who have contracted AIDS entirely through behavioral choices to be a drain on the funding that could be going to these people.
That's the other part, though. That's the other part. So here's the thing.
Okay.
The last is probably, this is the biggest complaint that I had about the video, and
you should have led with that. Just tell me I hate you because of this, but you know what I mean.
No. Come on, no. So the biggest problem that I have with it is the part about funding and the notion of this massive amount of money that's going into AIDS. And you were right. Per person who's exposed to the virus, AIDS gets more money than cancer, but cancer overall gets way more than AIDS. Like, it's a big bulk lump sum. Now, a lot of that too is because there's a ton of different types of cancer.
Right.
I mean, you can't just be like, well, what works for prostate cancer is going to work for breast cancer.
Right. And that's been relatively recent too, actually, the changing with cancer, particularly breast cancer, because that was there were huge awareness campaigns. But before that, it was all red ribbons and AIDS, 80s through 90s.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's like that South Park episode. Nobody cares about AIDS anymore. That sort of thing.
Yes.
Now, and I made this point in my video too. You can make the argument that with how much progress you've made with AIDS because of that money, then maybe you can start the process of de-escalating the money and trying to find a better way to funnel it into other things. But research money isn't easily transferred from one to the other. Before 2015. The United States government did not pay for even half of AIDS research. Since 2015, it's had to increase it until now it is actually over half the money that's going into AIDS research. And that's because, again, AIDS isn't that fashionable anymore. So to maintain the current status of the projects that they have going, they have to make up the difference. Now, I'm making an argument that basically that's not the right way to do it, and that's not the right allocation of funds. And that's a fine argument. I'm totally with you on that. but it has to be compelling. It has to be sold to me in that way.
Yeah.
Because we do have results from all this research.
Let me sell it to you this way. First off, I find it funny that when we say the United States was less than half, that's the standard we have for a country. We have to account for more than all of half. By the way, there are more than 2 countries in the world, for people out there who don't know. And if we don't fund more than half, we're like, you greedy capitalist bastards. Really? How much is Germany doing? Not half, but that's
I was talking about research.
No, I know. That's an aside. I always talk about this. If we just gloated about the things that we're the best at, Americans, that other countries do when they kind of pull one over us, like, oh, we have better public education in the United States. If we just did like, hey, we landed on the moon, bitches, suck it, you know, like if we're like, hey, cure for polio, like everything amazing is the United States, and same thing, like you need to pay for more than half of the whole world. But let me sell it to you this way. It's kind of the chicken or the AIDS-riddled egg. We got more funding by lying about AIDS. We got more funding by lying about the risk factor of AIDS, by telling people that 1 in 5 by 1990 would be dead from AIDS. And so people said, oh my gosh, we have to fund this research for AIDS. Whereas the fact is, again, as we both agreed, it was a statistical close to 0% chance of people getting AIDS in comparison to other diseases, which are not at all beholden to behavioral patterns, like type 1 diabetes, or there are some congenital disorders that really destroy lives. So that's my issue, is the politicization and the hysteria that was used to get funding, which was based on a lie. And it's not that I don't care about the AIDS patient who gets that funding. It's that I really think it's unfair to not care about the kid who didn't get the funding because Bono didn't do a campaign.
Bono.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you, but I'm also kind of not, because you also have to remember when the AIDS hysteria was going around. I mean, we'd have to go back and look at what exact year was it that Oprah was talking about. 1 in 5 people.
I think it was 87.
It was 87. So at that point, statistically, the statistics for actually catching it was a lot higher than what we understand now. Because again, that's counting in an entire medication that's turned the mortality rate. The closest we could figure out the mortality rate, if you caught HIV back in the 80s, your mortality rate was about 86%. You were dead.
Right, but the chance of catching HIV was never higher. That's my point. And we lied and said that it was in order to get these drugs. And there is, I know people don't like this, but when you have a disease where your statistical likelihood is completely non-risk, even if you're going out there and you are just an absolute cad, right? It's a statistical non-risk factor. There is a queue, and we do have to look at risk factors with diseases. And the AIDS advocates funged data and lied about the statistical likelihood of their disease, of transmission, in order to jump the queue. And unfortunately, not only did they jump the queue and get all of the research funding, but the American public, as seen by the response to my video, still thinks that AIDS is a much bigger risk factor than it is. They're not really educated on the issue because they've been held in the dark.
Well, it's not necessarily completely a non-issue either. But I mean, So I looked into a lot of the things that you said in the video, especially on like how people were misrepresenting things. The paper that they had to retract, I think, was like 47% of all the responses.
Yes.
The Stephen C. Joseph in New York City. But I mean, even him, when he had cut his number in half from 400,000 people in New York City to 200,000, that's still 2.7% of a major metropolitan city. Like, that's spooky. It's spooky, and it's freaky. I mean, the thing for me is it really comes down to, we have evidence that at the time the research money really, really did work. Maybe it was built upon hysteria, maybe it wasn't. It's hard to say because, again, there was a reason that it was terrifying, and it was terrifying because of the mortality rate. It was terrifying because without antiretroviral medication, the chances of getting it was a lot higher. As soon as we got those drugs, I mean,
but let me ask you this.
Magic Johnson's doing great.
Magic Johnson's kind of a piece of shit. But I mean, just as far as the cheating, and what did he say, like 7,000 women? By the way, I'm pretty sure one of the women was named Todd, in case people need to take a guess. I shouldn't say that. But I'm just saying he was very, very... He was very much a philanderer, which I'm not a huge fan of. Let me ask you this. What's the likelihood of someone with type 1 diabetes living based on modern medication that's been created in the last several decades? I don't expect you to have that number. It's not a trick question, because I don't have it either. But the point is, they need it more than everyone in the United States would need AIDS funding. There are far more of them who would need it and don't get it. And they don't get it because of several issues that we've agreed on, because of lying about data, because of fear-mongering in the media. And so this idea, and I know you agree with me on other sides of it when we're talking about Antifa and this sort of Black Lives Matter and the identity politics, this victimhood culture, right? Focusing on a victim and a held-up, sort of perpetuated victim actually creates real victims. And the AIDS hysteria, which we agree was false hysteria, even though the drugs did save some lives afterward, was based on a lie. And that's my issue with it, is the truth. And I think we probably agree on more than we disagree here. Do you think we?
I think we do. I mean,
okay.
Like I was explaining to a few people who were a little angry with me because I came out and I was like, actually, I really, really disagree with this on a specific purpose. And they were like, well, you must just hate Crowder for his politics. I'm like, no, not at all. I think instead it's more about the tone and the way it was handled. Sure. I still don't agree necessarily. Like I'll agree with you that the hysteria was out of control. And I'll agree that there is an argument to be made that now, after we've gotten such good results, maybe we can start allocating that to other areas where people need it. But it has to be done really smartly. And obviously, we got to get like the right kind of experts into it,
sure.
The right kind of people to not misappropriate. Because I mean, I do a lot of work with medicine sciences and whatnot when I'm doing my videos. And if you were to ask me, do you think there's any corruption whatsoever in the organizations that use AIDS research funding? I'd be like, of course, probably.
Sure.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm down with that.
I think any organization whose sole purpose is to receive grants to study their limited form of medicine or science is obviously beholden to their theory being proven true in order to get those grants. So it could be any disease, or it could be any scientific model. I mean, if someone goes, hey, I need these grants to make sure that I'm right, and they go, oh, shoot, I'm wrong, the grants are going to stop. So yeah, I think you're right. There's corruption, period. Put it this way, science and research are corruptible, certainly as it relates to research. I think we'd agree on that.
It depends a lot on how that's formulated, because the thing is,
right.
Research institutes, not necessarily individual labs, but the labs that do really good hardline work, they have to have all of their stuff cross-examined. Their experiments are then replicated and proven true or
sure.
proven wrong. Those are the types of things that you can try and trust in. The people that you have to worry about are the people who are going to politicize science and how they're going to represent the scientific findings that they get. Science at its core, as long as it is thoroughly and repeatedly and historically cross-checked, is something you should be able to trust in, at least.
Let me rephrase it. Science is corruptible through human contamination.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, that's what I meant. All right. Do we feel like we've had a good fair shake? Are we good? Can we bring on our?
Good.
Okay, good. I want to make sure, and you can go back to your folks and let them know if we were fair. But I want to bring on Chad with AIDS, as he's known affectionately on this program. And actually, he's really glad. I know people think this will probably be more of a debate than it is, but it probably won't. It's just that Chad has been chomping at the bit because, and by the way, he's on Twitter at ChadFelixG. We call him Chad with AIDS because we are horrible human beings, but we love him. No one wants to show up and converse with him, where he is a huge advocate for disclosure laws, where if you believe in disclosure, can you guys see each other? I know we just had to kind of switch over the program. Yes. Okay, good. And I'm sure, Jeff, you probably would, I don't know how, let's, come on, somebody hit somebody here. This is too civil. And Zach Ford refused to debate Chad, saying, from Think Progress, saying that I think you're a homophobic, hate-mongering bigot. So I would like both of you to kind of come on, since this is an issue that's near to both of your hearts, and discuss how do we move forward from this and help both society at large and the AIDS-riddled community. For you can talk now, not Kate Jared. I'll remove you from your cone of silence. But Chad, do you kind of want to do you want to lead it? I guess I'll let you lead this conversation, and I'll play moderator here, or sort of, I don't know, host. I guess that's what I'm paid for.
So there's a piece of this that you both missed, and that I took away from the video, which I really liked. I thought it was an important video, and that is HIV takes about 10 years to become AIDS. So people don't get AIDS like they get pneumonia.
Right.
People get a virus that decimates their immune system, and then they're more susceptible to problems.
Sure.
Something that people don't talk about from the 80s and the 90s is the drug culture and the sex culture of major metropolitan gay centers. People were engaging in alcoholism and drug use and something called poppers, which is like is what people used to use to clean out VCRs, that has been shown to cause pneumonia and skin lesions and that sort of thing.
I was thinking about those candies that crackle in your mouth. So that shows how out of touch I am. Just go into a gay bar, that's all you hear. Okay,
yeah.
Sorry, continue.
So those factors contributed to people getting sick so fast. And those factors contributed to the continuation of people getting the virus. So there was a period of time when people didn't really understand what was happening, and I understand that. But we very quickly realized that it was transmitted through sex and through drugs. And in my opinion, the problem is that Oprah and the media making this seem as though it were a massive issue that could happen to anyone, they took away the personal responsibility of the individuals in the gay community, and we have remained the highest infected group, I think, because we've gotten to be victims in this situation, rather than realizing that we are the ones responsible for the spread and for our own illness. Today, we have fantastic medications. I'm on medications, and I have great health, and I'm asymptomatic. But if I use drugs, if I engaged in very bad sex practices, I might still be sick. And even though it's harder for me to pass the virus on, the statistics that you were talking about, the left and the LGBT community insist that I can't pass HIV on to anybody because of my drugs.
This is true. By the way, Jeff, you look like you're kind of confused. This is true, actually. We've had Zach Ford on the program I'm sure he's been on it in a multitude of ways. He's been on the program to discuss this very specifically, and he was saying that if you are asymptomatic, it's almost impossible. It's 99% likely that you will not transmit AIDS. And this is true, and I think this is important for Chad to touch on because he knows this personally. He talks about the victim culture. In removing the personal responsibility, you now have, Chad can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the majority, or certainly the people who speak the loudest in the gay community, fight actively against consent laws, which Chad fights for. And that means if you have AIDS or HIV, whether you're asymptomatic or not, legally you need to disclose it. And the left is very much against that, which I think goes back to this idea that it was really politically motivated as opposed to getting to the root causes of the issue. Yeah,
I think probably the reason why that is, I mean, as far as like far left media outlets doing that is, it's probably in a way weird virtue signaling because they worry that it is being politicized specifically to attack people who are gay. I mean, that's what I would have to assume they're talking about. I mean, it is still, if they're on their HRVs and they're asymptomatic and it's a single contact. I mean, it is still extremely low for gay men to transmit it between each other. I mean, it's higher than anybody else's for sure, but it's still pretty low. But it's strange that they try and advocate that. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that. That's weird.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, well, you think, I think, what do they call you, Chad? Do they call you a self-loathing homo? What's the term for someone like you who just wants people to say, just like before you go to high five in the bedroom, say, hey, by the way, I have AIDS. That's it. That's all you're really asking for, right?
Right. And so my problem with the media issue is that they made it seem as though being HIV positive happened to people, like getting cancer. They took away all of the responsibility and the ability to protect yourself from the disease. And that's what they're doing today, too, because they're so fixated on stigma. They're so fixated on things being anti-gay that they're willing to put people's health at risk. So to me, that was the big message of the video was this is what happens when the media politicizes a medical issue. You can't trust what's happening. And when you start funding it massively, you have no idea what you're getting.
Yes. Well, pause, because I know Jeff wants to jump in. Yeah, that is the premise of the video. The main point is like I said, it's they lied in order to create the hysteria and to get the funding. And that does a disservice to people who are actually at a much higher risk factor for HIV transmission. Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I mean, if we just want to say blame Oprah, like, I'm fine with that. That's
Yeah.
But I mean, okay, so they're talking about personal responsibility and that sort of thing, and kind of detracting from it. Well, I mean, you could do the same thing with certain cancers as well. I mean, if you don't want to get lung cancer, don't smoke cigarettes. You don't want to, get stomach cancer, don't be drinking like 2 liters of Mountain Dew every single day, et cetera, et cetera. But
you hear that, not gay Jared? You hear that, not gay Jared? Sorry, he needs to hear this about the Mountain Dew. It's a problem.
Just saying. Yeah. Just saying. It's not good. Don't do the do, kids. Don't do the do.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I'll let you continue.
No, it's very strange to me. The whole thing is very strange, and I very much understand the notion of people just kind of disparaging you. I guess they feel like you're a gay turncoat or something like this in the political sphere. It's very weird. That's very strange to me.
I think lung cancer is a fair example. I don't necessarily know that stomach cancer and Mountain Dew is. Again, I think the correlation between gay butt sex unprotected without lubricant is probably a little higher than someone having a Code Red playing Halo and then ending up in the hospital with stomach cancer.
One of those describes me.
Yes. So I think we'd probably agree on some of those. And yeah, I do think that behavioral diseases that are statistical non-risk factors for people who don't engage in those behaviors, I really don't think it's fair for them to be politicized to have a disproportionate amount of funding. People can do whatever they want privately, but when it comes to tax dollars and grants, I really just have a problem with the dishonesty and the misleading. Chad, I'll let you go. Then we have this has gone long. This has been very productive, and look, no one yelled at anybody yet. Chad, I'll let you go, and then I'll Jeff, and then we'll wrap this up.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that I heard from a lot of even my followers on the right that they didn't like about the video was the idea that they perceived you as saying, yeah, gay people deserved it. They got this disease because of what they were doing. We shouldn't have. We were wasting money on poor kids with cancer instead of doing this. And I think that whenever we're talking about these sort of situations, we have to be rational. And whenever we're emotional about it, we end up realizing that our emotions get in the way of actual progress. And so that's what I liked about the video, was that it was funny, but it also highlighted the insanity of emotion-based decision-making. So I think if you want to comment at all on that.
Yes, Jeff, I'll let Jeff go, and then I'll finish this up.
I mean, I can understand where you're coming from in that too. With that, and also with something that you said the last little bit that you said. When it comes down to it, whether there was a hysteria or not, and that it was a lie, an intentional lie, or hyperbole, or just a really bad campaign to try and raise awareness, and it was just done in a very duplicitous way. We can at least look back historically and see that even if we hemorrhaged massive amounts of money into AIDS research, we do have something to show for it. We got the mortality rate for something that was knocking people dead very, very quickly, and it was well, not quickly in the sense of like how long it takes to turn into the syndrome and then kills, but was spreading pretty quickly, and it was pretty much a death sentence. And now, as long as you're able to get your HRVs, which is a benefit of living in this amazing country that we live in, and those HRVs were developed with the research money that came from that hysteria, your mortality rate if you catch HIV now is impossibly low. It's incredibly small. So I mean, you can make the case on maybe it was duplicitous. I mean, look at Oprah. You can make the case that maybe it needs to be readdressed, and there's a whole process for that, and it's complicated. But you have to at least marvel at the fact that we did manage to do it, and thankfully you're still here with us, and will probably be here until you're an old man, hopefully with a great family, because of those drugs and that research money.
So let me kind of just touch on a couple things, hopefully wrap this up, and I appreciate both of you guys being here. Yeah, listen, I certainly wouldn't say we have nothing to show for it that we don't have drugs, but I still do think something based on a lot, it's a problem. I mean, I think 20-something thousand people die from lightning every year in the United States. Probably more than straight people who die from AIDS. Probably pretty comparable. I don't know the exact number. Watch people say, there is no source on that. I'm just using it as an example. Killed by lightning. Now, if we decided that we were going to make the #1 most researched behavioral pattern in America and give hundreds of billions of dollars to teach, to figure out what causes people getting struck by lightning, And then after hundreds of billions of dollars later, we go like, oh, don't go out with a metal umbrella. Yeah, we have something to show for it, but it doesn't mean that it's proportional to what is needed in society, certainly as it relates to the level of funding. As to compassion, and I know, and I think Jeff has been pretty fair here on the program, and I appreciate Chad bringing that up. Listen, this obviously is when people say, I want you to be a serious pundit. You're at the wrong place. Okay, this is the same channel that has Tranny Bane, but it's never done in a mean-spirited way. And as Jordan Peterson said, a lie told very kindly is not better than a truth told plainly. Sometimes we mistake compassion with coddling or with being dishonest with people. And this was never meant to say that gay lives don't matter or they deserve to get AIDS. It was simply meant to hopefully enlighten people who did not know the true history of the AIDS epidemic in the United States and the reality behind its risk factor. Also, I got to get my dog involved with Tom Hanks in Philadelphia. Anytime you can fit that in there, that's always fun. At Jeff Hollandaise is here. Thank you so much, sir. And then at Chad Felix G. Thank you guys both for coming on. We really appreciate it. Hey, this video is taken as a clip from the full show, daily show at louderwithcrowder.com/mugclub, where it's available exclusively $69 a year. That's less than $6 a month, less than 2 expensive cups of coffee, or you can feed an African child. But what do you want to do? Just buy coffee or join the Mug Club. Daily show, louderwithcrowder.com/mugclub. See you there. Don't feed children.